Hi, everybody. I'm Smita. I'm really pleased to be here. First time in Kasoli, and absolutely stunning. Looking forward to hearing more speakers after my stint with Santosh. So I'm going to be talking to Santosh about his new book. I've got copious notes, but he's going to do all the talking, and I'm going to ask some of the questions. So Santosh, as you know, has written one book already, and this is his second book. I'm just curious to know, before I even ask him any questions, how many of you in the audience have read Santosh's regular column, City City Bang Bang? Now only about a third. I was hoping we'd all kind of go like that, because they are absolutely brilliant, and each one is different from the last. I've got the very last one that I read last week in my hand, which I'm going to read out from at the end of my conversation with you. I am not managing time. Who is managing time for me? Anybody? Because I know you like to be on. So you'll raise your hand? No, because I've been told we've got half an hour and then questions after, but if I don't keep looking at the time, I'm not going to know when half an hour is up. Anybody here who's going to support this? Okay, we have to do it ourselves. Righto. So we'll chat till about 11:45, and then we will open the questions to the house, okay? So, Santosh has written about many, many, many things, and I thought the best way for you to get excited about his new book is to begin to understand the kind of person Santosh is. So, I want to start by asking you questions about your writing and your worldview, Santosh. You've said, for example, that you're not observant in the usual sense, but that you try to absorb the spirit or essence of something rather than every detail. So, what I want to hear from you is of a moment perhaps when that approach failed and you missed something crucial.
Well, that happens all the time. I mean, in the sense that, I'll just back up a little and talk a little bit about, this worldview that you spoke of. I think something that I feel strongly about is the fact that, we divide the world into important things and trivial things. And we devote a lot of attention to talking about big subjects, big important subjects. And my argument in a sense is that nothing is trivial. The smallest thing contains seeds of something larger wrapped into it. And to my mind, that to me is something that is, that animates a lot of the writing that I do. I have written about weird things. I mean, things that would seem to be absurd to people. I have, for instance, written about the meaning of the disappearance of the pigtail in young girls. I have talked about the power of the great Indian invention called the pajame ka nada, which I think is an absolutely stupendous invention. It is so forgiving. It has such a capacity for generosity and forgiveness and the like, right? So my essential thesis is the fact that when we see the world around us, observing the world, it's not so much observing things as much as asking, why does this exist? It's actually asking, and because to my mind, the most amount of insight and new ideas come from looking at the most obvious things. And that's why I miss the obvious things all the time. All the time I miss obvious things.
But then you focus on them. I mean, that's just two wonderful examples. He's talked about milk. He's very recently talked about zero.
Yes, I have talked about
and
zero.
I found that very, very moving, because I live in London and I'm happening to be visiting, and I'm in Delhi. So therefore I am every Monday. Where's the Times of India? Where is it? Where is it? I need to read it. Because each week he gives us something that's completely different. He talks about what is farming. Santosh is constantly peeling away assumptions. So then tell me something. Is there something that are you currently obsessed with something that perhaps, like the nada or the zero or is something so totally random that we just take for granted?
No, what I am obsessed with is unfortunately not that trivial. I think and that has a lot to do with the book that is going to come out shortly. Unfortunately, it's not ready here right now, but it's out next month, which is really looking at technology. I'm fascinated by the fact that, here we have this new object, people who have grown up, a lot of people in this room, thankfully, unlike a lot of the other places I speak at, who have seen the world and life before the mobile phone came. We all grew up at a time when there was no mobile phone at all, and now we cannot imagine life without it. And to me, this idea of how technology, from the smallest sort of it's interesting to just illustrate the how trivial, even in technology, which is a big idea, how relatively trivial things make such a big difference. There is a book by a writer called Jonathan Haidt, who talks about the I think the anxious generation, if I remember the name right. And he argues that, something interesting happened after 2012. After 2012, you found that in the US, teenage, particularly, mental health issues skyrocketed. So if you look at the graph, it is a sort of slow graph, and then it just takes off after 2012. And particularly for young girls, but also for boys. And he correlates that with a change in the feature of social media, where it became possible to forward and possible to share likes, and therefore, in a sense, made your private post public, which means you became sort of exposed in an arena where everybody could judge you. And I mean, it's a correlation, it's not something, but he then backs it up with a lot of data to say how a small change in a feature in technology can have a cascading impact, which is huge. And I think, to me, I find technology fascinating because I think most of the effect of technology, I mean, we understand what is wrong or what are the effects of technology. We bemoan a lot of them in some senses. But I think the most powerful effect of technology lies in its form. It's not necessarily in its content. What I mean by that is, let's look at the mobile phone. The mobile phone, what does it do to a large number of people in India who have been faceless? Right? The idea of a phone is such an empowering, just the idea that you matter enough. These are, in the old days, there was the crude classification we had for something like this was we separated India into masses and classes, which is a terrible designation, but it was used in popular kind of language. And for the masses, the idea of being important enough to not only have an identity, to be able to be reached personally, to have a personal, everyone's phone is their personal connection with the universe. It's like their exclusive relationship with the world. Nobody else is privy to that. No two people's phones are alike. I mean, you may have similar apps, but everyone's engagement with the world is fundamentally different. And to me, that is such an empowering thought. Or
even when people can't read and write,
absolutely,
they still hold a smartphone these days. And that empowers them in a way that they could never have been empowered before, I think.
Or take the idea of the touch screen. What the touch screen is doing, it's this eager beaver kind of a technology that is waiting to leap into action at your command. What happens is that it trains us in a way. When we touch something and something happens, then our view of the world becomes that when I ask for something, something must happen. Because there is a sense of entitlement, something like breeds over a period of time without any content, just the form. Just the form that I touch something, every part of the screen is responsive. I merely have to breathe into it, like I have to touch it, and it will do what I want. Over and over again, day in and day out, we are being trained to expect. So that's why sometimes you see these photographs of young kids, at a magazine, pressing it, wanting the screen to come alive. They want something to move because, they can't imagine a world where screens are inert, where they don't interact, where something doesn't happen as a result. So I think it's fascinating as to how. So to me, that is really what is of great interest right now. Not just the big picture of technology, but it's in its minutiae, the everyday kind of a.
But if you hear Santosh and the excitement and the passion and the poetry that he's just used in speaking about this thing, that's it. That's what he's talking about, that we all take for granted. And it just makes me think, Santosh, I mean, for those of you who know of or do know Santosh, he straddles two worlds. He straddles the idea of brand strategy, business consulting, and so on. But he's also poetic. He's also a political commentator. So do you ever feel tension between the pragmatic world of brands and the intuitive, lyrical world of essays? Or do you think they just kind of flow into one another?
No, I don't feel a tension because I think it depends. To me, brands can also be, because eventually they're ideas and they can be poetic as well. And I think a lot of these constructs are artificial. And I think one of the things I personally strive to avoid is dividing up the world into labels, because in a sense that then we are not able to there is so much fluidity and interaction between everything connects with everything else, in a sense. So to my mind, brands, what are brands about? Fundamentally, it's about human beings. It's about connecting with emotions. It's understanding emotion at a mass scale. That's what a brand is. A brand connects with people at a mass scale. So it is actually an anthropological object. We don't call it that. We call it, weird business-like language we use. But eventually, it is an anthropological object. It is about, connecting with people at scale, changing behavior if possible at scale. So to my mind, fundamentally, that is not different from anything else that, a lot of the other endeavors.
But you've been writing a column now for 21 years. You're also interviewed on podcasts. You're all over the place in terms of your ideas and your thinking. And I'm just wondering, is it just like you're drinking milk? You write about milk. Perhaps you don't even drink milk, I have no idea. But the point I'm making is it now just this idea of poetry in motion about the very basic stuff that we take for granted comes to you naturally? Is your mind constantly on, for want of a better word, overdrive? When you and I were talking briefly before when we met via Zoom, you had mentioned that certainly this idea and the pressure, if you like, in inverted commas, my word, not yours, of creating something every week for the Times of India, obviously the whole family has to support you. So what does that look like then, from a personal perspective?
No, it can be difficult. I mean, it's been over 20 years, and I have, the person to blame is sitting in the front looking at a phone right now, Bachchi, for this. It started out innocently enough. It was supposed to be a few weeks, and then they forgot all about me. So it's now 21 years of writing this. Yes, there are times when it is very difficult because, week after week, once you find the subject, writing it is not difficult actually for me.
So
now.
what is exercising you at the moment? Okay, because you could guess what? Next week, in a few days, if you haven't written it already, if you read the Times of India, you're going to be reading a piece. Can we get a sneak peek, perhaps?
Yeah. So I think one of the forthcoming things I'm thinking about is how do I put this? I'm thinking about the idea of one of the thoughts is about free will, as to why we need the idea of both free will and destiny. And why instead of trying to understand what works better, it is better perhaps to understand why human beings need both the ideas of free will and destiny. The other is the idea of the fact that I'm always interested in the absolute coincidence of birth. The fact that what a freak chance. I mean, if you just imagine our presence here is the product of such tiny probability, right? It is at that particular moment, your parents have to have something in their mind, which they have to then translate into the action. Among the millions of competing sort of sperms that are swimming towards their destination, one of them at a particular moment gets fertilized, and you are born. And so, to me, the idea one is the fact that we are all freaks of nature. We are all completely improbable, and also the counterfactual, which is the fact that imagine the millions of other unborn possibilities, and who are left by the wayside because you are born. And to me, it's just a fascinating idea. I don't know what to do with it, but yeah,
you don't know what yet to do with it. I watch the space, ladies and gentlemen. I bet we're going to find something about that too in the next few weeks. But just to come back to you, Santosh, because okay, so you started off advertising. We know all that history. Then Bachchi said, hey, come on, why don't you write a piece? And here you are, and there's 2 books, and poetry in motion pretty much all the time, creative poetry in motion pretty much all the time from where I'm sitting. But can we know a little bit more about Santosh Desai, age 15, 18, maybe 10, I don't know. Who was that Santosh? What was it about him that got him to where he is today?
I think like a lot of people in this room, I think in some form or the other, I was part of a middle class family. My father was in a public sector company, and we traveled across the country, like I'm sure a lot of people here. And I think, to me, particularly if you look at my first book, which was talking about how India has changed post liberalization, I think I was actually going back into that experience of growing up then, and the fact that how we managed to find so much joy and dignity in so little, and the fact that there was and how the idea of celebrating whatever you had, and however little you had it, the ability to kind of almost scarcity multiplied joy rather than dividing it, and to me that aspect of growing up, I think, has been foundational for me. The aspect of, finding that kind of pleasure. And so, for instance, I remember, going every summers, we used to, from wherever we were, we would go back to our, as was the case, right? Even if you were nuclear families, your emotional headquarters was always your hometown. So you were all kind of branch outposts of a headquarter in the hometown. And we used to go back there, and there were a whole bunch of cousins, And I look back, and we had a small house. In any case, there was no concept of rooms belonging to people. Rooms were rooms, everybody was in every room. And we had this one loo, and I don't know how we managed. I honestly don't know how we managed. And yet the idea of, and I remember this aunt of mine who, we would go and visit her in Ahmedabad, and she had a piggy bank because they were really strained, normal kind of usual circumstances, which she would break for so she would save all year, and she would break that when all the cousins came, so that we could have some sense of abundance. And how to contrive abundance out of little. So for instance, you would get baraf ka gola, the chusna wala gola. And so I remember for her, big thing was to say, have as many as you like. And to us, like, that was amazing. The idea of being able to have as many as you like of anything was actually was a very big deal, So it's like that, So to me, that was a foundational experience, and a certain, let's say, so it's interesting. When I first thought about writing my book, and I went to one of the publishers, Penguin, as it turns out, and they turned around and say, yeah, but what we are looking for is a satire on the middle class. And I said, I'm not doing that, because that is distancing yourself from your own past, and then now pretending that you are too good for that. Whereas, to me, it was always about, yes, we are weird and we were nuts in so many ways. Yes, sure, we were insane in many ways, but it was us, right? And there is a certain fondness and a certain sort of an affection for that kind of an upbringing that I cannot satirize. To me, it would be dishonest to do something like that, because it is fundamentally wrong, right?
I can't help but say, this is all about Santosh and not about me, but this so resonates with me, because I was born in Bombay, brought up in Calcutta. My father worked for the Statesman newspaper. But every summer we went home, in inverted commas, to our ancestral home deep in the village of Kerala. And we all had these mattresses on the floor, all of us cousins. Yeah. And when I wanted something sweet to eat, my grandmother would give me one piece of coconut and one gur. And my God, to me, that was still the most, even today, the most delicious sweet that I can have. One piece of coconut, one gur, there, go now. And that is it. And of course, but then it just comes to me also, I think, Santosh, you and I have similar age possibly. Do you think that perhaps we are kind of being now, because we're the age we are, going down the path of nostalgia and if only? And I can see many young faces in front of me, many similar age to us, but many much younger than us, who might be, say, 30, 25. And I wonder what does that look like? Maybe that's another column for the future. Or perhaps you've written it in the last 21 years and I haven't read it, I don't know which. But the idea of nostalgia, and what does that mean to us? And certainly what it means to me and what it means to you. There's no question about that. But what about today's 20-year-old or 15-year-old? When I went to the village, or you went home to your hometown, all in one room, exactly like we were. And we love it. We don't want to satirize it. It made us who we are today. What does that look like?
No, so I think, nostalgia in some ways is always an escape from the present, right? In a sense, it is a desire to seek a refuge in a better time, in which is sometimes imagined, because, nostalgia rounds off the hard edges of memories. It kind of romanticizes and makes a hazy romantic kind of a idea. You forget the fact that you had to stand in, queues for hours, and that, there were all kinds of problems that you had, even, when you talk about the difficult times. So I think with young people, it's not as if nostalgia is a timeless human emotion, and I think you see there are people who are nostalgic about, early versions of so people are nostalgic about the Nokia mobile phone, for instance, right? And it's like, oh wow, you remember, we had this mobile phone. So yeah, and a strange thing, I remember for the first time when we had taken our two daughters to Disneyland, which I found a completely plastic and pointless kind of a place. But for them, and I was amazed, and I was, to say, a little bit disappointed also, to be fair, was the fact that for them it was like nostalgia of a childhood they never had. It was not there, but they grew up with those reference points and they were nostalgic of all the things about Disney, right? So I'm just saying that nostalgia is something we need. And regardless of whether you are young or you are old, you may find different things to be nostalgic about. But it is something that, the present is never, and particularly for the young, I mean, since we are on the subject, I think, in the corporate world where, also I'm sort of, I have one foot there. So there's this narrative today about how the new generation and Gen Z is an entitled set of people. Their work culture is poor and their work ethic is bad. And they're constantly there. Even something goes wrong, I mean, they're ready to quit. And there's a whole narrative that is building. But on the flip side, I think I would like to just, picture yourself and put yourself in the place of a generation where everything has changed. There are no certitudes left anymore, right? If you look at technology is changing and redefining, you don't know what AI is going to do to jobs. The world, you're sitting on the brink of something which you don't really understand, you have no sense of. You look at romantic relationships, and now we have classifications and language of a kind that nobody understands. You have people in situationships. You have all kinds of new kind of vocabulary. It's very interesting, in fact, today, that if you look at young couples, when they talk to each other, they're almost co-therapists rather than being romantic partners. They will talk about toxicity, red flags, gaslighting. There is a whole vocabulary where you are actually, because there is nobody else, because you have so much exposure, you have so many options, nothing you do is good enough. There are billionaires at 19. So ab kya kar loge aap? How will you best them? The fact that you have to present yourself on a daily basis, you have to keep worrying about the fact that you are taking selfies and putting it up, your DP is changing, the world is evaluating you all the time, and it's like, how do you keep the kind of pressure that you go through? And I think it's important, I think certainly for the older generation to also, I think, have a little more empathy for what the younger people are going through, because it is a difficult time for them. It is a time unlike any other time that we
I
faced.
completely agree. I mean, I know we've had to change from not having computers, AI, any of that. We've lived through all of that. Our education was completely different to today's youngster. But I think it's very crucial to have empathy. What I also wanted to flag, Santosh, is that you're very honest, you're very, I want to use the word, you have strong opinions, that's a better phrase, about India. But what comes shining through when you write in all your columns is your deep love for India. I mean, there's no question about that. You will criticize it constructively, you will question it. But you come with the angle of love, and I just wanted to kind of put it out there. It's not a question. For those of you who don't know Santosh, I think you would really appreciate the essays in his new book. It's such a pity. I thought you might have it here to sign, because then there'll be a line outside signing. That is a pity, because I read it as a PDF. But in one of your essays, which was under the chapter of modes of living, you talk about urban life, living the high life was a sense of entitlement, which is kind of what we were talking about. And there's one sentence that I've written that I want to just read out from one of your essays. Relationships of all kinds are built on the bedrock of small hypocrisies. Here again, relationships of all kinds are built on the bedrock of small hypocrisies. And I thought, I mean, he does explain it, but I'd like Santosh to explain, what does that even mean to us?
No, I think it's true, right? In all our interactions, the fact is that we don't tell people what we really think of them, right?
Your mommy, your brother, your husband, your wife, your children.
I mean, at all given points in time, if you had to tell people what you really thought of them, partly because it is not important that I think a certain way about you, but partly because it would destroy the relationship for no reason at all. And the fact is, in fact, one of the big problems that we have today, thanks to social media, etc., is the fact that we have abandoned those hypocrisies. We have abandoned the courtesies that go in the name of polite discourse. Politeness, by definition, is dishonest. I mean, if you had to take a hard look at politeness is a little veneer that you put on top of what you really feel. And so if you were to be really kind of anal about it, politeness is a mild form of dishonesty. And it's like you go to the US and everybody keeps asking you, how are you doing? And they don't give a rat's ass about actually your answer, right? So and you feel, okay, I'm answering and that person has moved on, right? So that's the, so fundamentally it is that, right? But it is so important, it is so important that we retain that sense of hypocrisy, that sense of being what is hypocrisy in a certain sense? At one level you can call it a form of a lie, at another level it is being mindful of the other person's sentiment. It is being mindful. So in your words, you are taking note of the other person and you are accounting for the other person as somebody worth taking note of. So there is a form of respect that is embedded in any act of hypocrisy. So to my mind, all polite discourse has to be based on these small acts of hypocrisy, because they are what actually make it palatable for us to be with each other.
Which is why I love these essays that you write, because to most of us, including me, when you think about the word hypocrisy, it's a lie, you're not being yourself, you're being dishonest and so on. But what you've done is taken a word that means something to most of us and turned it around to make us think about the idea of honesty. Because that's exactly what you're saying. If you want, you can't, it's important for relationships to have, to filter and not to be completely open, whatever your relationship, however close you are to the person. And we all do that, and I completely agree with you, but I just thought that sentence was, I thought, oh, it jumped out at me. I thought I had to point that out to you. But just to continue on that, so, you know, I mentioned that Santosh certainly has a, and you can feel it viscerally when you're reading, a love of India. But 21 years of writing City City Bang Bang, how do you think your own view of India has evolved? And do you think that there is a belief or assumption you held when you began 21 years ago? So please put your mind back to that first column that Bachi asked you to write, that you've had to abandon perhaps, or perhaps significantly revise?
I think so. I think I have to say that my view of India has darkened over the years. In the early stages, I think of liberalization, and immediately after that, there was a lot of, there was a lot of energy in India, and the energy that was bubbling up from the ground, and there were big changes because of the fact that, you know, everything was new, and in a sense it was an unstoppable form of an energy. I think what I'm seeing now is the energy remains. I want to be clear about the fact that I think there is, in fact, if I was to broadly kind of classify this, I would say that if I was to look at the net effect of technology and the changes, all of the changes that have happened are of two kinds. One is transformation, where we have new modes of living, new emotions, new opportunities, new ambitions. You see the change in women when you go to small town India. It is astonishing. I mean, this astonishing energy that you see there, astonishing self-confidence that you see there. So there's an entrepreneurial spirit you're seeing in people. There is a desire to do much more with yourself. Young people are investing in themselves in a way that is incredible. So at an individual level, there is that enormous energy. But the other thing that has happened, partly because of technology, in fact, largely because of technology, is the amplification of old resentments and the political enablement of that. So what has happened is that it's almost like what this technology has done, largely because never in history have the means of the microphone has always been jealously guarded by the elite. Always. Through history, through culture, never was it possible, barring small experiments in democracy. If you go back to Athens in an earlier time, never has every individual had access to the microphone. For the first time in human history, that is happening. And that means what is happening at one level, it is democratizing. At another level, our discourse has now it's got, you know, pegged at the lowest common denominator. So that's what our discourse has become. It has, you know, we have the whole idea of somebody knowing better, somebody having having studied something has lost value. And I think what is happening in India as a result, the fact that we are all the old resentments, so all the fault lines of religion, caste, gender, you're seeing a huge kind of a reaction, which is being politically enabled. So my worry is the fact that we are creating modern arenas, but playing theater, and the plays that we are playing are of old scripts. It is louder, more aggressive, more vicious sort of discourse that one is saying, while at the individual level. So this tension, I find, between individual transformation and societal regression. It's not just India. You're seeing a sort of a primitive instinct that you see, for instance, in Trump's America. It is primitive, it is base. It is going back and on immigration or Rahul talked about what is happening in Gaza. We are seeing the fact we are kind of going back in time. And to my mind, actually, in India in particular, because my thesis in India, and one of the other things that I've been thinking about a lot, is the fact that I would argue that in India, culturally, our unstated desire is that we want progress, but we don't want change. We want a better life, but we don't fundamentally want to change. And our society is so strong, it is so good at preserving itself. It is so good, it creates these hybrid forms. I often talk about, for instance, in an everyday sense. Yeah, that is the art piece. In an everyday sense, let's look at how we manage new influences. 40 years ago, if somebody was to tell me that 40 years from now, we would still be getting married through arranged marriages, I would have laughed at that person. I said, 40 years time, how can, India will change, certainly we're not going to be. But we are. But it's a different arranged marriage. Now we have the arranged love marriage, right? Where essentially what happens is that we arrange कि boy will go meet yourself few times or देख लो अगर अब तक हो जाए. It's a supervised dating program, right? Under the supervision of the parents, you allow the boy and girl to meet and find themselves. Or the love arranged marriage, where the couple fall in love, the parents pretend कि आप तो मिले नहीं कभी, and we will arrange it, right? So this elasticity that India has, right, of being able to accommodate the new within the folds of the old. At one level, it's a superpower. It's fabulous. At another level, it means that we resist change of all kinds. And I think the biggest problem in India is the problem of soft infrastructure. Hard infrastructure is easy to build, there's money to be made there. Soft infrastructure is about governance systems, is about trust, is about the fact that if you build a road, it will stay built, it will not disintegrate in a few months. It's about the fact that if you build cities, you will follow the norms. It's about the fact that every officer will be disinterested, will be not. In India, what happens is all power is personal. All power is used for a personal end. It is perfectly legitimate. If you are powerful, it is personal. And to be powerful means you are an exception to the rules. The meaning of power is exception to rules. Now, for instance, on this road, coming up from Chandigarh, like in most tolls, there are these massive green and white, if you've seen those hoardings, which outline who are the people exempt from paying the lousy 60 rupees or whatever you have to pay for the toll tax. In which other country? In which other country is there such an abiding passion to specify? It starts with President, Vice President of India. The President and Vice President of India are going through, you want to, why would you do that? Why would you do that? To me, this just is this idea that the powerful are somehow must be exempt from rules instead of being exemplars of rules.
This is absolutely, this very much resonates with this piece which came out this week. For Tuesday, not Monday for some reason.
Yeah, this time.
I think I'm looking on Monday, no sign of it.
That is because no. That is because the gentleman called Narendra Modi actually had taken that space.
That one, slight distraction there. But it's a superb piece, and the title of the piece is "Progress Without Change." And I've just marked it's a long piece, and Santosh has already spoken at length, actually about this. It is. I completely 100% agree with what you've written here. It is absolutely superb. He writes a comment very early on in the piece. It might be time to face the harsh truth. India may continue to grow at a reasonable rate, but as things stand, it will not become a developed country. And that's heartbreaking when you read that. And he goes on to explain why. And he ends with, until that leap is made, India will remain what it has long been, a country that changes everything except the way it changes. It will grow, it will shine in parts, but will never become what it could be, not because we cannot imagine it, but because we have built the alternative too well. Seriously, this is such an outstanding piece, and I am now a fan of Santosh Desai, but this one is my favorite and happened to come literally 3 days ago. So if you haven't read it, it's obviously not in the book. I urge you to go and find this particular piece and read it. Definitely. But then I'm also going to say on the other side, in your book, you under the chapter culture between Samaj and Samay, your opening chapter talks about what is Samaj and Samay, which is and specifically, I think it's Karwa Chauth today or tomorrow or something. I'm not entirely sure, but because I don't mark it. But can you tell the audience a little bit about what you meant by that?
No, I was saying that if you look at two kind of axes on which we can think of today, I think one is what influences. If you, for instance, go and ask somebody कि आपने ये क्यों किया, so there are two kinds of answer. One is हमारे वहाँ ऐसे ही चलता है, कि हमारे वहाँ ऐसे यही रिवाज है. The other answer is कि आजकल यही चलता है, right? When the axis moves from हमारे वहाँ यही चलता है to आजकल यही चलता है, is when change happens. Because then what happens is that it is not cultural contiguity that drives your behavior, but your desire to be connected to the present moment. So I think that is what I was talking about there, is the fact that this is the path we are trying to navigate, from being largely determined by Samaj to being increasingly determined by Samay. And that tension between Samaj and Samay is really what a lot of us are experiencing in our everyday lives.
Okay, I've just noticed the time, so one last question before I open it to the audience, because we do have a management of time, fortunately. Seeing as I'm sure many of you are from Chandigarh, I'm just going to push this guy here to my right a little bit. So, Chandigarh is often described as too planned or too neat compared to the messier cities you write about, predominantly Delhi, which you know so well.
Right.
But if Chandigarh were a person, how would you sketch their personality?
No, I think Chandigarh is would be a vibrant person. I think is also Chandigarh is also its people. It's not just the place, right? It's an extremely vibrant I think person. I think the benefits of order, I think, are there are people, of course, who have talked about how that kind of an order is soulless, and you can romanticize, and up to a point I can understand that. But you live in any other metro of today, and you will get really nostalgic about Chandigarh. Not that I have lived here, but I have certainly visited it often enough, because I think that order gives a certain structure, and within that structure, I think there is a lot of vibrance. There is a lot of kind of a desire to live life fully. So I don't think the order is in any way dampening for Chandigarh. So I think of it as a very lively but organized kind of a person.
Okay, I think we'll allow that for all of you from Chandigarh. I hope you agree. Okay, open to the house. Any questions from the house? There, with the gentleman with the hat, and yeah. If you want to stand up, sir, so we can see you and mention your name. We can't hear you. Hold on.
This is Indrajit Dhillon from Chandigarh. But what I've got to ask you is something about hypocrisy, because I was quite taken aback. Somewhere in 1982, I'm a baby boomer incidentally, I was commanding my regiment in Rajouri. And I was very fed up of the phone, because we had to literally, crank it to get through. And not only that, we were not audible to each other. So one day I decided that out of hypocrisy or love, I want the answer, please. Whether what I did was, I taped my voice and sent her a cassette through a soldier who was going to the same place. You can say some form of impropriety, like President of India, dispatching letters like that. But would you call it hypocrisy or love?
Love, absolutely, sir. No question about it.
I have to agree, because it just suddenly reminded me my siblings went to study in the United States, and I was living in India, and they recorded, because they couldn't afford to call, it was so expensive. They recorded audio cassettes, and then when somebody was coming from the US, they sent it. And I'm happy to say we still have the cassettes. I haven't digitized it. But I mean, my God, that's love. I have to agree with you on that.
So the Guju form of this love is the fact that your relative calls you and you say, I'm not here, but you hear their voice, they're okay. So that's that is the Guju way of doing this.
There's another person just next to you, I think, who raised your hand. Yeah, if you want to just pass the mic down.
Hi, this is Devina Mehra. So I had a comment and I had a question. So the comment was we were talking about how most people our age or have a problem with Gen Zs or millennials. So let me just give one quote. This is, our youth now love luxury. They have bad manners, contempt for authority, show disrespect for their elders, love chatter in place of exercise. They contradict their parents, gobble up their food, and tyrannize their teachers. Guess when was this written? This is.
I know that
Yeah,
early.
this is from Pompeii, graffiti, 79 AD. It actually goes back to a Greek play. So human beings have not changed in a few thousand years. The other one, I mean, nostalgia is something that has bothered me a long time, that why is it so hard-coded within us? I mean, it is hard-coded, but what purpose it serves in human evolution, I have not been able to figure out. The other thing which I have not been able to, so I don't know whether you have an answer to that. And the other thing is that I've never been able to figure out what is, I mean, normally Hindustani is a much more nuanced language for human feelings than English, but I have not been able to find a Hindi or Urdu equivalent for nostalgia. So, you know, these were my two takes on nostalgia. So I don't know whether you have an answer as to why it's so hard-coded.
No, I don't know if I have an answer that is satisfying. I may have an answer. No, so I think, you know, so you know, at a certain level, you know, you could argue that and this is an esoteric answer, so I apologize in advance. But you could argue that the safest place that all of us were in the womb, right? So there is a certain, there has to, you know, so there is a certain, and for instance, or childhood, right? Because it is the purest form, it is the purest form of existence. And what happens is that because as you get burdened, to my mind, the answer, and you know, is the fact that as with time, we carry more burdens with us. We carry, you know, there are layers and layers that kind of, you know, come and settle down on us. And we very often long to get away from those layers and to find something essential and true. And so the idea of the golden period, for instance, as a myth, the idea of a golden yesterday is a myth across cultures, right? It's a timeless myth across cultures, that you escape from your current situation to something that was idyllic, that was Edenic, you know, that was, you know, so, and so to my mind, it has to do with now rather than then. It has to do with, you know, how you feel in the today. So I remember that every time I used to get stressed, you know, in corporate life, I would say, I'm to retiring in 30, at 40 I'm retiring, then 45 I'm retiring, etc. I'm still not retired, but you know, that in something, but I don't, like I said, an answer, maybe not a satisfying one.
There, oh. And after that, there's a lady in the front, if you could bring the mic. The mic isn't working.
Hello. Yeah, I'm Anshuman Kapoor from Chandigarh. So this goes on that line which you're mentioning between the destiny and free will. So looking at your life backwards, how much was free will and how much was destiny, or it was like that old song we all love, "Main zindagi ka saath nibhata chala gaya."
It is main zindagi ka saath nibhata chala. Kyunki in a sense, you know, like let me just say that, you know, the most important thing, for instance, is who you get married to, right? So let me narrate how, you know, so I was I was watching something in Siri Fort, I remember, late at night. I was a bachelor at that time, and I go to the bus stop, and totally randomly I meet somebody 1 year senior to me from my institute, who starts chatting with me and saying that, you know, what are you doing? And I was in this, you know, I can hardly claim that this was free will. This was destiny. So I guess, you know, Zindagi Ka Saath Nibhata Chala is actually the best for how perhaps we are articulating it.
Serendipity for sure, yeah. This lady in the front, yeah.
Sorry, the lady and then.
Hi, I'm Dr. Amrinder Bajaj, and I'm a gynecologist and an author also. And I want to ask, I don't know if you won't have the answer, I think, but when we were young in the armed forces and all, and we used to go, we never used the word, I'm bored. And we had nothing. No TV, even no, one phone, you'd get drunk call in a neighbor's house, not one phone. TV also came late, everything, and we were always happy and always enjoying ourselves. And we never used to run to my grandkids come to me, 8-year-old twin girls. After about half an hour, I'm bored. I'm bored. So what do we do with them?
No, so I don't have the answer of what we do with them, but I have, because I've written about the idea of boredom and the fact, exactly your observation, right? The fact that, we grew up, and I remember, sitting at a window and watching stuff happen. I remember doing it for hours. In the evening, and in the family, for instance, you would have this porch, and you sit on the porch, and you just sit there. And nothing happens. I mean, people are going up and down, and you watch other people's activity. And that kind of a fallowness of the mind, I think it was so important, because that's when you imagine things. That's when you create worlds in yourself. That's when you're not spoon-fed. Today, what is happening is that we seek stimulation all the time because of devices also. So there is this, and because it is, also the way devices are designed, we have the perpetual scroll, right? It's infinite. So you keep scrolling, it will never end.
That's true.
Right? So there is always a sense that, and that's why we are always partially present everywhere. We are always somewhere else. This is a rare audience. This is an incredible audience, because thanks to, I have to say, the age profile, that you actually have people who are looking here. Otherwise, today, if you go to any audience, 60% of them at any given point are looking here, and you are speaking, and it is so disheartening, right? So I sympathize with you. I am on your side, but I don't have any answers.
Couldn't agree more. There's a gentleman just here. If we can give it to him and then come back to you, if you don't mind, because it's last
There's a
two
young
questions.
student there also with a question. So
We have to get the student at the back as well.
Also.
So first this gentleman here. First the
He's been
gentleman
waiting,
and
yes.
then the student. Thank you.
I wonder, Santosh, if you have heard Jagjit Singh talking of Daulat bhi le lo, Shaurat bhi le lo.
bilkul.
When you listen to that poem or song, you get back to nostalgia, all of us rather.
Yes.
And then we cherish it, we love it. At that point of time, you forget about modernity and what ChatGPT or AI is. So is that not a love for nostalgia?
No, of course it is.
Number-
Why do we love old songs, right?
Number two, you talk of destiny. Destiny is a truth. It is relative. When I say relative, it is always situational. Situations do create it like it got created in your case, so it got created in my case. So destiny has something to do with situations. My third point is, have you ever written about a soldier who is fighting a war in Sichuan? I have a lot of things to talk about it, but this is not a place to talk about it. Would you like to develop on that sometime when you talk about India?
Certainly. Thank you so much for your comments, sir.
The last question at the back from the student. Sorry, maybe we'll just see, because we've been told we have to stop.
Hello everyone, I am Hitesh from St. Mary's Convent School, Kasauli. So sir, you had that statement in your article where you said that all relationships are built on the bedrock of hypocrisy, right? So I felt that statement was very wrong, but then you explained it beautifully. You said that what you meant by hypocrisy was that we do not need to lie, but we need to be polite. But if that is absolutely true, and in relationships if that happened all the time, wouldn't all relationships crumble? Because there has to be a point sometime in your relationship where you are absolutely honest. Because then only you can convey your feelings, right?
You're absolutely right. You're absolutely right. I think, I think like in anything in life, right? This is we don't live between extremes. We don't do only one. We don't act only one way. So, in things that are not material, hypocrisies work. In things that are material, they destroy relationships. You're absolutely right. So I think it is for us to judge, right? But the fact that it is not a blanket statement that hypocrisy is wrong. That blanket statement I disagree with, just as I disagree with the blanket statement that therefore one should always be hypocritical. I mean, the world has shades of grey between both extremes, and I think, and to me it's actually not a debatable point, frankly. The fact is that we indulge in small hypocrisies all the time, and that's why the statement said small hypocrisies. I mean, so the one word you missed out was small. It is small hypocrisy, not big hypocrisies. But you are right, absolutely right, that there's a difference between hypocrisy, those small hypocrisies, and dishonesty. And dishonesty kills relationships. You're absolutely right.
Thank you, sir.
Do we have any more time, or are we done?
No.
Okay, one last, because this lady's been waiting. One last.
So the best thing about the fest is that our speakers and panelists are available after the sessions also, so you can keep engaging. Thank you. This will be the last question.
Yeah. I won't take much time since you were talking about your experience in the corporate life and you said you wanted to retire by 35, 40 or 45. So I've been in the corporate world, I can relate to it. How important is flexibility, fungibility and fluidity in terms of roles and in terms of what you do in corporate life? Because I believe we are talking of memes for Mummyji, even Papajis are really facing a tough time out there in the corporate life.
Yeah. No, absolutely. I think, in a way that I have a lot of sympathy for the way Gen Z reacts to corporate world, because I find that the corporate world is structured on yesterday's assumptions. It comes from a feudal mindset. I find it very interesting that, corporates can talk about the fact that, like Mr. Narayan Murthy is fond of saying this 70 hours a week kind of stuff, is the fact that why is there an expectation of going beyond the contract? The corporation owes no loyalty to the individual. If something happens in Venezuela, in a multinational corporation, people get sacked in India. Not because they did anything wrong, but because you lost money in Venezuela, right? If the corporation owes no loyalty to people, why should people go beyond the contract to have loyalty to the corporation? I think this is a completely feudal, old kind of a mindset which is created, and so it's important to challenge this, and I'm glad young people are doing so. I'm glad that they are actually taking up this mantle and challenging and looking through the hypocrisy here, which is not good, young man.
So finally, Santosh, when can we get memes for Mummyji? Is it on Amazon? When?
No, it'll be early November, so it should be first week of November is when.
Okay, so gentlemen, ladies, early November, look on Amazon and buy your copy. Santosh Desai.
Thank you so much, Smita. That was amazing.
Thank you, Sangeeta and Santosh. That was a thoroughly enjoyable session. Sorry, Smita. Thank you, Smita. I'm now going to